Have you ever wondered why your paintings look amazing when you follow a step-by-step tutorial, but somehow when you create on your own, you feel lost? This can only mean one thing. Your brushwork is top-notch, which means your execution is well developed, but what is lacking is a solid framework for your watercolor process. If that's the case with you, then stick around, because in this video, I'm going to show you my 3-step method which you can use to create realistic painting. I like to call it the 3S method. Hello, I'm Sari. Welcome to this video. Let's begin with the first S. We begin softly to keep everything flexible. This is about establishing light areas and creating a general color atmosphere. I'm choosing to paint on dry paper since the petals here are much smaller compared to the rose petals we did in the last tutorial. This decision is already helping me to create more intensity even with a very diluted paint because there's no water on the paper to dilute it further. So the consistency of paint here is very diluted, like that of tea-like consistency or tinted water. I know it's very tempting to apply a simple flat wash. However, instead of filling each petal with one even color, you can gently deepen the color near the base of each petal. I'm using deeper yellow like yellow ochre and even a touch of orange. Let it fade as it moves outward. This mimics how real petals have more depth where they connect with the center of the flower. And this simple transition creates the illusion of foam. At this point, the paint won't spread so much, so only if you want to and you feel ready, you can introduce some finer details with a thicker consistency of paint. Since the paper is still damp or moist, these lines will spread very little and it will help you to create more depth. I have sped up this part of the video because it's the same process applied again and again on the rest of the petals. Notice that I'm skipping a petal every time. This is because the first petal I just painted is not completely dry yet. So if I painted the petal just next to it, it would cause the paint to bleed from one area to another. So once these petals were completely dry, I came back in and painted the rest of the petals. When all the petals were completely dry, I moved to the center of the sunflower. Since this area is quite big, I'm going to switch to the wet on wet technique so that it gives me enough time to apply paint without worrying about the hard edges. I used a cream-like consistency of sepia and a tapping motion with the tip of my brush to create the visual texture at the center of the sunflower. In just a few minutes, I will revisit this area and show you in more detail. Now let's move on to the next stage, which is another S, which stands for structure. Structure comes from separation of forms and depth. This is where most paintings either start to come alive or fall apart. So here's where the midtones come to your rescue, because midtones live in the transition zones. The midtones generally are slightly darker and less saturated color than your base color. You can either choose a color that fits the description, or you can mix your own midtones. For instance, I chose yellow ochre as midtones in this painting, but you can easily mix some midtones by adding a touch of complementary color to the base color. Since purple is the complementary color of yellow, so here I could have added a small amount of dioxazine violet to the cadmium yellow pale. And also slightly reduce water in your mixes so that the consistency is automatically thicker than the initial wash. In the structure stage, I almost always paint on dry paper. This is because it gives more control over where your paints can travel. And since I want to create forms, I want the paints to go to specific areas only. These can be areas that are in shadow, the areas where the petals are overlapping, and the areas where the petals are folding away from sunlight. And to avoid hard edges, you can always use a slightly damp brush to soften the edges in this stage. Coming back to the center of the flower, I'm applying a diluted burnt sienna on dry paper. Then once again, I took cream-like consistency of sepia on my round brush size tool, and with a tapping motion with the tip of my brush, I am reinforcing the visual texture without painting each and every tiny detail. By the end of this stage, your painting should read clearly from a distance. It means that it should have visible form and volume. It should still feel soft and not overworked because contrast and sharper details are yet to come. On those petals behind, I'm applying a very diluted Windsor lemon. This is a cool yellow which helps me to push back those petals and create more depth. For this large leaf over here, first I painted very softly with a diluted Hooker's grain and then with Hooker's green mixed with Payne's grey. I'm painting the cast shadows with the grey I mixed with cobalt blue and burnt sienna. These are the colors that I've already used in this painting. I'm also dropping some cool lemon yellow to create visual interest in the shadows. Let's move on to the third S, the final stage of the painting. Now it's time to sharpen what matters, deepen what anchors the form, and leave the rest alone. Think of details as an emphasis, not decoration. If you're pressing emphasis everywhere, it becomes too noisy. The key is placing detail with intention and stopping before freshness is lost. I often feel that the one stage that really distinguishes one artist from another is this final stage. This is the stage where you are assessing your own painting. And to do it really well, it does require a lot of experience. But don't worry, it'll come with time. To sharpen the details, you can use a very fine brush. I'm using my 000 round brush and a very thick consistency of paint. In this case, I'm using sepia mixed with burnt sienna. So those are the 3 stages in the 3S method. But since you stayed till the end, I'll share with you one hidden S. This one begins before you put paint to paper, and it is the most important step in creating realistic art. This is the stage where beginners rush and experienced artists slow down. Learning how to see is not passive, it's analytical. If you train this stage well, your process becomes easier and your results become much more consistent because your painting gets decided here. The rest is execution. So now we have moved through all the 3 stages of the 3S method. Softening the first layers, building structure, and finally selecting where to focus. When those elements come together, the painting begins to feel complete. I hope this process helps you approach your own work with more confidence and intention. Please drop me a like and subscribe if you haven't already. I'll see you in the next tutorial. Bye for now.